going for this. So thank you all. I am very excited that all of you showed up for this meeting. This is kind of the first time that we've attempted anything statewide for all of our admin folks. And so you never know how something's going to work until you try it. So you all send me your feedback after this and give me your thoughts on it. And if it's helpful, maybe we can do this again. And if it's not, then I'll forget this whole thing ever happened. So, but anyway, since we are having a recertification, or since this is a clinic year for recertification, I just thought it would be good to get this group together and maybe talk to you specifically as dry side officials, instead of trying to get you thrown into the mix with all of the wet side folks and different things like that, so we can just make sure everything's covered. So I am going to just touch on a few things first from the recertification clinic that we're doing on the wet side. And I know some folks actually sat through this with their clubs, through the whole half-hour version of it with their clubs. And so I told them if they already did that, they didn't have to come do this. It would be more just informational, hopefully maybe a little continuing education, so to speak, for you all that would not apply to the wet side. So first of all, let's start off with the recertification requirements for this upcoming year. If you're doing the clinic tonight, you'll get the credit for that. So that part is finished. The next piece, and I am reading off a list, okay, is working the required number of sessions. Looking at this group, I don't think that's going to be an issue for anyone, but I am going to go through it just as a matter of procedure here. So if you are a timing judge, that would be a minimum of 4 sessions worked as a timing judge at some point during this during this 2021 calendar year. If you're an administrative official in AO, it's a minimum of 6 sessions worked with at least 2 of those in the AO role. And for administrative referees, it's a minimum of 6 sessions as either DEC ref or administrative ref, with at least 2 of them as administrative ref. However, I will say we do not really use administrative referees in a true sense of administrative referee. So if you're getting anything in admin, it's going to count. If you're there for the 6 sessions, it's going to count just fine. I'm not going to quarrel over that. What I just read you is what we have on the LSC website. So if you have questions about that, we can work through those if you want to just email me. The next piece to this is completing and submitting your 2022 non-athlete registration to Kentucky Swimming. Now, in the past, this has been a paper form. And so this year we will not have a paper form. Everything is being done online. So if you go to Kentucky Swimming's website and you go under the membership forms area, you will see it's actually for officials, it's right up there at the top, the non-athlete membership. It's a real simple little Google form. You can fill that out. It won't even take you a minute to get that filled out and submit that through there. There is a spot at the bottom of that form that asks you how payment is going to be made for the membership. So if you have a club that pays for you, there's a spot where you can indicate that. If you pay the fee yourself, there's places there for that. And you can use credit cards in there or mail a check to Versailles. It's kind of an anything will work on that type of, the format that's in here. Now, this is the first year for us doing this online with Kentucky Swimming, but this is going to become the norm because I believe this is transitioning over to USA Swimming handling all of this. So don't quote me on that, but this year it's Kentucky Swimming's website. Like I said, just go ahead and get that knocked out so we can get you in the hopper on that. And Maureen connects with me on all of those things, so I know who's ready to actually look at for recertification purposes. Some other things that we want to look at, make sure you're looking at your background check expiration date. If that's getting ready to expire, go ahead and renew it. Of course, those background checks, are only good for so long. So if you're not going to expire until the end of December, there's no need in really renewing that until you get into December. Right now, there's been pretty good turnaround on the background checks. You know, when COVID hit last year, the place where they send those off to was up in New York, and it was taking like months in some instances to get those things through with the way the pandemic shut everything down. It seems like everything's flowing really well right now. So I'm not as worried about the turnaround time on that. And I think probably if you have at least a 2-week window, you should be okay. Should be, but there's not a guarantee there. But anyway, just more than anything, make sure your background check is good before you get ready to work at MEET. That's what we really want. Athlete protection training. Check the expiration date on that. And you all know, all of you have been here for a while, so you know that's how to get to that on DECPAS and USA Swimming's website. So athlete protection training has been a little quirky. Lately, USA Swimming has been having some problems with it. So most officials that have been trying that within a couple of weeks of the expiration date have been okay. Sometimes it won't look like it's loading the renewal course correctly. So if you run into any problems with it, like misbehaving, shoot me an email. And if I can't figure out what's going on, or if it's not an issue that we are not already familiar with, I'll shoot that over to Colorado and we will get that fixed for you. So that's athlete protection training. Now, last year, was it last year? Yeah, I don't remember. It all runs together, but concussion protocol training does not have to be done again. That was a one and done. You all are already finished with that. So if you want to renew that, just, you know, for the goodness of, out of the goodness of your heart, or so that you can sleep better at night, or for whatever reasons, Kentucky Swimming's website has the links to where you can go to either the CDC's website or the National Federation of High Schools just to do the review on that course. So, but no need to do concussion. The background check and the athlete protection and the registration, those are the biggies, okay? Other things that I'm not going to touch on, but I'm just going to let you know that we're doing for the wet side recertification clinics. We are talking about officiating athletes with disabilities, and that won't necessarily be something coming into your realm a whole lot as far as what part of the body that you look at when you have an athlete with a disability. But if you are working, say, as a stroke and turn judge at any point, if you step in for somebody and you happen to notice that you have somebody there who's disabled, you would judge them the exact same way that you would any other swimmer. If that athlete is, say, missing an arm, you judge them based on the portion of their body that they do have. And continue on. There's going to be certain things you'll have to think differently about, because if they're missing a limb, you may not be able to judge, say, if they're missing, you know, if they're missing an arm, say, you know, something where you have simultaneous arms, like, you know, the butterfly or, you know, the breaststroke, you're not going to be able to do that accordingly. You kind of have to imagine that that other limb's doing the same thing. But that's kind of the gist of it. So I won't go too much into that. From a table perspective, the meet referee or deck referee might come to you and ask you to make some accommodations for those swimmers. So it might be that they need to be put in a different lane. So that may be where it starts to, you know, kind of come back to some of the things that you all do, where we have to try to do things for them to make accommodations where they need different things at the start or for whatever reason. So the coaches, we're trying to get out to them to let them know they need to be talking to the meet referees in advance. And then, of course, the meet referees should be coordinating with everybody else when we have the swimmers with the disability. If there's anything that needs to be done that would be any different than we would have with any other swimmers. The other things, let's see, that we're talking about, we are doing the online job signups again on Kentucky Swimming's website. Now, I know with this bunch, you all usually have your crews already set. You know, the meet referee usually knows who the AO is going to be for a meet, and you all usually are communicating behind the scenes with each other as to who else you're going to have at the tables. So that's the online job sign up has not traditionally been something that, you know, we would expect for, you know, the admin folks. But you all tell me if you think that that would be something that would be more helpful to you, or if it's just something that's an extra step in your day. So I'll kind of leave that for you all to think about. But from what my perspective is, what we're really looking for is the wet side officials that we're going to have to assign in positions. You all are usually very well organized on that, and you never really have too many problems having the help that you need to have.
Hey, Jackie, can I interrupt just for a second on the job signups?
Sure.
So hi, everyone. Good evening. I was trying to do some job signups for the wet side of the deck, and I was having trouble logging in. So I'm just wondering where I might find instructions for that. It's obviously, I tried the volunteer and the #1 volunteer, and it was not working last night. So I'm just looking for direction on how to best sign up.
I'll tell you what, Rachel, I will check it out when we're finished with the call tonight and see if there's any problems with it. And if there is, I'll get in touch with Maureen. But I'll email you one way or the other and let you know.
Okay, I'm sure it was me, but I appreciate it.
Okay. Now, the other thing I want to talk about with this group, and this is my last piece, is about recruiting and apprentices. So we have been doing a lot of recruiting on the wet side this fall. You know, last year we took a break on all of those activities because of the pandemic. We didn't want to put people in close quarters with each other, just out of an abundance of caution. This year, it seems like everything has freed up, so we've go ahead and we have a green light again for recruiting. So with that said, anyone who's here and who is an administrative official, certified AO, if you want to go ahead and do a clinic for a timing judge or an AO clinic, please email me and let me know what it is that you would like to do, when you want to do it, and the location, and we'll get that on the schedule and everything so we can do that. And of course, I usually stay away from those other than the scheduling, because this is not my area of expertise. This is what you all know best and far better than I do. So let me just say that if you have other people in your clubs and you want to go ahead and get some of those parents involved, go ahead and grab those new parents, you know, that may be looking at becoming stroke and turns, and try to entice them to come on over and work at the table with you. And let's get them certified as timing judges. So that's how we do that. And we need new blood, you know, over at the table just as much as we do at the ends of the lanes. So I know some of you don't have a whole lot of people. It's not a deep bench. So I'm just saying, if you want to go ahead and try to get some of that going, just help yourself. And if there's anything I can do, please let me know. Now, with that, we have some talking specifically about people becoming new officials, timing judges. There are forms on the Kentucky Swimming website. There's documentation for the clinics and things. And those of you that have done clinics before have seen these. I have been going through and trying to update things. So for the timing judges, there's a checklist for new officials. And so the one for timing judges has been updated to have all of these new steps that we're doing in here for the online registration and different things like that, to give them more instructions. And it gives them better contact information and things like that for their process. So it's been working well with our new stroke and turns. If you start to work with that form and you see things that need to be updated or maybe aren't working so well, please let me know. A lot of our forms have not been touched in probably a decade or better. So I'm trying to bring all of that stuff current, but I would appreciate feedback on all of those things. And one last thing I want to share, when we're talking about apprenticing, this is kind of my soapbox moment here. On our apprentice forms, all of you are familiar with the forms and how we have the little criteria across the top that tells what we're looking for while we're working with these apprentices in the sessions. The mentors are supposed to be filling those forms out at the end of each session. And there is a legend for all of these things. So let me see if I can share my screen with you. Can you all see the apprentice form?
Yes.
Okay. Is it large enough to read? Let me see. Okay. So I want to show some examples here because what I'm receiving back from some apprentices, and this is on the wet side, but I get these all over the place, is what I have in the middle of the screen here is the rating system. And it's kind of the same rating system for everybody, where we would put a P if they're proficient to perform the duties unsupervised, and an I if they improved in the session or they needed more, you know, an need more training, you know, an N if they just need more training, if they didn't really improve. So you get the gist here. What I have gotten are things that are kind of like this top form where there are just check marks. I got a form the other day that just had the word yes written across it in all the boxes. And the first person did it, and then the next 3 people did the same thing. So nobody bothered to use the actual rating system. And so, you know, this top example is what would be incorrect, the incorrect way to do it, except for that very first session that has the P's and the I's. This form down here, you can see the letters are in there for everything. So that would be more of a correct form. And the reason that's important is it gives better feedback, not only to the apprentice about what they need to do, maybe things they need to work on. It also tells me quite a bit about what's been going on as soon as I get that back to complete their certification. So it kind of helps me know, you know, maybe where there's some deficiencies that we need to work on, you know, across the LSC. So I just want to bring that up to say, if you're working with folks and you have apprentices, you know, just please make sure that you're actually looking up there and taking the time to give them their P's or their I's or their N's or whatever it is that we need to have on those forms. So with that, any questions over anything I covered to this point? Okay. So now I am going to turn this over to Lisa Boone. I asked Lisa to kind of take care of some things for us, to give you some continuing education as far as administrative functions with the table. And let's see, Lisa, I believe you can do a share screen and we can see your screen.
Let's see. Yay, can you see it?
We can, very good.
Yay, so far we're good. All right, you ready for me then?
Yes, take it away.
So going back to what Becky just said, oops, I went to the wrong page. Going back to what Becky just said about the apprentice forms, from my perspective, one of the things that we worked really hard on those apprentice forms years ago. One of the things that I want to say is it really doesn't do any of us any good if we just sign people off for the sake of signing them off, because then it has bitten us a couple of times in the LSC in terms of people coming back saying, well, I'm signed off, so you have to let me do this, even if they're not demonstrating they know how to do it. So that's all I'm going to say about it. I just needed for you to, from my perspective, it's a little difficult sometimes. So this is going to be a little bit different session than what I typically do. I would like for this to be more interactive, just because I think there's some things that we haven't really been on top of for the last couple of years, because we had a whole year off basically. And I would like for us to collaborate on what works best for everybody, the things that we may have questions of concerning our experience, because we have a different level than some of these people. I can look at everybody that's here, and I know that there's a wealth of knowledge in this session right here. And I want us to be able to collaborate together to show everybody else what we think in terms of how we solve some of the problems that are presented during a swim meet. So before I say much else, I'm going to ask if there are any questions to this point. Does anybody have anything that they want to try to cover over the course of this? Any questions before we go into looking at some examples? Anything that anybody's got pressing on their mind? And if nobody says anything, I'm going to assume that's a no, but y'all better talk to me because, you know, I like to talk, but I like to talk to people that talk back more. So one of the things that I really want to cover again is the fact that we are officials. Some places still don't recognize AOs as officials. I think that's changed over the last 5 years, but there is still some discrepancy in terms of whether or not people are officials or as TJs, what the whole process is. So my biggest thing is that we have to be professional in everything we do and that we have to take it all seriously because we're the reason that they get the times they get most of the time. This came up this past week, so I'm going to mention this. One of the things that seems to be an ongoing issue at times is who is in authority and where that authority lies in terms of the wet side and the dry side. Ultimately, the AR is going to be, from our perspective, if you're an AR, then you are going to take priority over the AOs. That's just the way it is. Although they're supposed to be together, ARs do have a different perspective because they've also got the wet side that we don't necessarily have. That being said, from the dry side, it is our meet and we will work with the referees as much as we can. The referees ultimately have full authority over everything. So it's best to collaborate with the referees and have those questions answered before the meet starts so that everybody knows what the hierarchy is. Does that make sense? And do I need to go over that at all?
It makes sense, Lisa. The only thing I would add is that the meet referee is really the top in that hierarchy there.
Yeah, that's what I meant. The way I said it was wrong. It's the meet referee. So anything that we do on the wet side as AOs or ARs has to be in conjunction with the referee because technically it's the referee's meet. TJ doesn't really have any authority as the AO or the AR. It is our responsibility to make sure that everything on the dry side runs the correct way. And we defer to the referee, the meet referee when we need to, but sometimes with various personalities that just comes into play and we have to know if as a TJ, they need to stay in their TJ box and as an AO or AR, you do what you are supposed to as well. My preference when I am working up at the front is to let two of the people that I work most closely with be the AOs and I'll work the console because I much prefer the console, which puts me in a TJ spot, but I'm very aware of that and not everybody else. Sometimes the waters get a little muddied. So I just want to say that. If there are any questions, somebody speak up.
This is David. One thing I noticed on the rule book, they've moved some of their jobs around in the USA Swimming rule book this year and did something like, oh yeah, there's not actually a timing judge position anymore. Any idea why they decided to do that?
I honestly have no idea why they decided to do that. I think it's interesting though that the TJ is still recognized as an official position and the tests are still there. So I don't, that was a proofreading mistake. I don't have any idea about that part.
Well, and then things like the announcer specifically works for the referee, not the AO. So
I'm fine with that. Personally, but yeah, there are a couple of those little things that, you know, from my perspective as having, and I understand that the booth at U of L is a lot different because we're secluded from a lot of the stuff that people who are sitting right by the side of the pool have to deal with. So I honestly, as the person who's in charge in that booth, I know who to put in places. And I think as an AO and an AR, that's sort of our role from that perspective. I personally don't really want to have to deal with the announcer that much, because I do think they need to be talking to the meet ref and the starter, because it's all about what's going on deck as to how their rhythm flows. So I can't answer to some of the questions about what USA Swimming decided to do with their wording. I honestly have no clue. Any other questions about that?
I have a separate question, Lisa,
Yes, ma'am.
if you don't mind. And this is just stemming from, we were coming out of a COVID year and very few teams that are being on deck, and just the volunteer pool just being so thin. I just wanted some validation for my own, because I know, like, it really does require two people at the table, one on the computer and one on the console. And sometimes people are just getting help wherever they can find it just to run the table. So if we are in a situation where there's only one table official, and for argument's sake, let's say it's an AO or an AR, do we have to have a certified TJ working the console, or can it just be anybody who can really run the console so we can verify and making sure that we're getting time? And again, I'm saying this just because I know that the volunteer pool can sometimes be really thin, and we have, just looking at the schedule, I'm seeing where there's meets on top of meets, and that may drain our dry side. So I just wanted to make sure for my own sanity that I have some clarification so I can advise some other folks.
So the TJ position is a certifiable position, one where they can get a certification. There is nothing that says that you have to have a certified TJ working the console. I've never seen anything in writing that says that. The recommendation is that you have somebody who is certified. They can be a certified TJ working the computer, but you can also be apprenticing that position. So that's where it gets a little unclear. Personally, because I think the groups that I work with, for the most part, we're very fortunate, and we have the people that we need to have. I think if you can use any of those situations as a teaching situation, then you do it. But to fully answer your question, I have never seen anything that says you have to be a certified TJ to run the console.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Absolutely. This just goes back to what our responsibilities are as an AO and an AR, and that really is the entire dry side, and who we are responsible to in terms of the meet referee, but who we also have to oversee, because ultimately it is our responsibility if something goes wrong. I mean, it's just, when you're in a supervisory position, that's what your job is. So we just have to pay very close attention to all of those things.
Yeah, so if I could just add a little there, I've pulled up the rule book. So as far as the rules are concerned, there just needs to be one administrative official at that meet. So it kind of outlines in the rule book, the officials you have to have. And so it does that, but you were right. It really doesn't talk about timing judges at all. And I know in some LSCs, they don't even have timing judge as a certified position. So
Right.
I think as long as we have an AO, we're good, and AR be just fine too.
Okay. I think I've already said this. So it's just our responsibility to make sure the swimmers are getting the right times, and we have to be paying enough attention to know what's going on as far as problem solving. One of the things that I also want to talk about is the ability to problem solve. I know there are a variety of people who put systems together completely from start to finish. There are some people who have never set up a meet in Meet Manager from the beginning, mostly because the coaches do it. If there are any questions about that, I am glad to. I've set them up for years. I don't mind doing them, but if you have questions, if there are ever concerns, I'll be glad to help you set one up, because I think it's also one of those learning situations in Meet Manager where If you're the person who set up the meet, then you know where the errors may be. If you aren't coming in sometimes to somebody else's meet, it's a little more difficult because you don't know what's been communicated. You don't know where errors may be. But if you ever have any of those questions, there are plenty of us who could help with that. So just reach out to me. And then the same goes for setting up the equipment as far as the timing console and the touch pads and all those things. A lot of people have facilities managers who will do that for them. I also like to do that because then I know if a pad isn't working, I know I can already in my mind say, I know that pad's plugged in correctly. I know that it tested correctly. I've done all those things myself. I'm not saying everybody else needs to do that. I'm very fortunate that I work with places that I can do that. But again, if you ever have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. To me, I find it fascinating, but I'm also very strange. So some of the reminders I really wanted to go over. And please, again, if you have any questions about anything I say in this, please chime in or let's talk about some of it. And some of these questions have come up, and that's the reason I'm bringing this stuff back up, because I know every one of y'all have done this multiple times. So the differential of 0.3 seconds, that has not changed. That is still the same. We have to look at everything from a reference of that 0.3 second, okay? It could be a pad malfunction. It could be that the pad didn't start. I don't know. There are all sorts of things you have to be able to figure out. But what you are looking for is if your pad has worked and that pad is triggered, it is a fully automatic system, and everything you do from that point is to prove the pad's wrong. It's not that you're trying to figure out if the backup buttons are right. You're trying to prove that that automatic system failed in some way. Everything you do from that point on is to prove the pad is either right or wrong. If you can't prove that without a shadow of a doubt, then the pad wins. Okay. That leads to automatic first, then semi-automatic, and then manual. And you don't necessarily, when you pull up the box, and we'll look at this in a few minutes because we're going to go over some things that happened this weekend in Meet Manager. I have that meet and all the results in that I'm going to share in a minute. But when those things happen, if you don't necessarily have to put a time in. If you pull that up and you can look at the screen and see what's going to happen in terms of when you're calculating the time, when you do that, you'll see that whether you put a time in or not put a time in really is not going to make a difference unless you put a time in and you put in a manual time, and that manual time does have the ability to change what your pad time is. So in terms of never making up a time, this has come up more times than I care to mention over the last 2 years, where the pad didn't work, people didn't get the backup buttons, the stopwatch didn't work. And so somebody says, well, I went to the place judges and I just put a time in. That's really not helping anybody. It is not helping any of the swimmers that are in the water. My recommendation, and this is a recommendation I've discussed with multiple people, so this is not just Lisa making up things that fit my ideas, is to put in the seed time. Because that way, if you put their seed time back in, it is, every time I've had to do this, it has fallen in line with what the place judges found. I have never had to put a time in that did not fall in line. Now, the other side to that is if all those things failed, if your automatic, your semi-automatic, and your manual times all failed, how do you know that that place judge, who is a fallible human, is giving you the right information as well? So you're not doing anybody any good by making up a time. Okay. Any questions about that? Okey doke. To continue with some of the reminders. I lost my train of thought. You can, it is really up to you to figure out why there's an issue, especially if it says timer. Sometimes we have those timers who just, for the life of them, cannot figure out what that button in their hand is for, or can't figure out what the stopwatch is for, or can't really figure out how you write down tenths of a second. But those are all different stories. So it is really our job to make sure that we fix those problems, because we're really the only advocate on the dried side that the swimmer has. Because we see the big picture, we see all those things that are going on. And again, we have to make sure you're trying to look for evidence that the pad isn't right. If you can't find definitive evidence, then you have to assume the pad's correct. Okay? Any questions? All right. Yay! Exercises. All right, I have to get to my other screen, so give me 1 second. Anybody want to talk besides me, please?
Yeah, Lisa, let me ask you a question since you
Yes.
mentioned deficiencies of the stopwatch operators. How often do those types of things come up?
Every meet. Every
Is-
session of every meet.
Is there certain issues that are more common than others? And the reason I ask is maybe it's better instructions that our starters need to do when they're doing the lane timers meetings. So that's what I'm digging into.
I think that there are, and somebody else can talk during this part too, please. I think that there are some things that are said during the timing meeting that people just don't understand. If you've never seen a stopwatch and it is overwhelming when you're told this is a backup button or a plunger, whichever way. This is the backup button. You have to hold it a certain way. You have to push your thumb on this. This is the stopwatch. You have to get these times written down and do it all before the whistle blows, especially if you're in lane 8. For me, the thing that I typically will come behind and say is, I don't care what you do with those stopwatches, just get that backup button, because then it's a semi-automatic system and I don't have to worry about it.
Hey, Becky, this is Rachel. We had an entire session this past weekend where the timers just did not know what to do with the buttons and the watches. And we had to go back through by hand in multiple heats, multiple events, pulling up order of finish, just trying to figure out what the time could be. And to Lisa's point, we could easily prove that the pad wasn't right, but then again, we were left over the question, what is the time? Especially when you have a backup button and a watch that are like 2 seconds apart. The discrepancy was very large, and with soft touches in a 12 and under session. So we ended up having a conversation and reiterating to those timers, get the button. The button is more important than the watch. And I've also found that when I'm starting, if I just pause a little bit, or when I'm reffing, just giving a little bit more pause, just to make sure that all those timers have time to actually get reset, it just ends up having fewer errors on the back end. But that's just been my experience and just learning in my growth.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, this is good feedback. That's what I want.
Yeah, the biggest challenge is somebody pushing the starter and the ref pushing the timeline on an 8 and under session. And the worst thing you can ever do is let a bunch of high school kids time. Just don't do it.
Actually,
Just don't do it.
8 and under's time pretty well if you want to put them under in instead.
I haven't ever had that option, but high schoolers, I thought 8 and under parents were bad until we had high schoolers.
I think, Becky, the other thing for me is that the number of cell phones that the timers will pull out, and they'll be on their phones. So I typically will say that your phone needs to go in your pocket or someplace else. Don't pull it out.
Yeah, I've mentioned that when I've done lane timers briefings, and I know we actually have a lane timers briefing document we're kind of working in here to make sure our starters are actually having a checklist to work from. So yeah, so I'll go and underline cell phones on that, because you're right. And I think it just adds further complication if you do have some teenagers, because I don't think they know how to live without their phones for even 2 minutes.
Right. Right.
And I found if you, you kind of have to know who your timers are, but if you see that your timers are best buddies, then they mess up a lot more because they're too busy talking. They're not paying attention.
Okay.
That's very true. The other thing that worked well this past weekend, especially with some of these newer meets, and I know we've got a lot of new parents, is that the person that did our lane timers meeting, they did everybody that had never timed before with someone who had timed before. And that was very helpful, just because then the new people weren't overwhelmed, or at least they didn't feel like they were. So I also think that more instruction by the starters at the beginning gets very confusing. So the less instruction they give the timers in terms of what everybody else is saying, we need for you to watch the strobe, we need for you to hit the backup buttons. And if the last thing you can get done is the manual stopwatches, then that's fine. But as long as you get those backup buttons and we know they're working, we're going to be fine.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
All right, so my first one I'm going to do here, everybody can see these, right? I have to see what I've done because there were so many of them. It was so much
We're
fun.
still on the slide presentation.
Oh, are you really? You can't see the meet?
No, timing
You have to
exercises, hooray. You have
Okay,
to
You have to
probably switch
unshare your
monitors.
screen and reshare.
Let me do it again. Is it there now?
Now we're good.
Okay, good.
All good.
Okay. There was a wealth of knowledge in here, so. All right, let's do this one. Okay, so somebody else is gonna have to tell me what's wrong with each of these because I'm not gonna talk now. And just start with lane 2. Tell me what you would do, what's wrong and what you do. And I will call on volunteers if I need to.
Calc it.
Thanks, David.
I got someplace to be, so let's move. I gotta move it along. Lacking any additional information, the average of the 2 buttons for 2, average of the 2 buttons for 3, and on 6, it'd be nice to have order of finish, but odds are it's not gonna tell you much about the difference. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, the 6 is just pad time. It's confirmed by the 55-25.
So the problem with 6 though, and you're right, 55-25 and 55-36. The problem with 6 is that that's barely outside the 310 from the pad. So that's one of those situations, in my opinion, where I agree, I would go with those backup buttons because those match each other and there's not enough. It really doesn't make sense. The other thing is, look at what stroke it is. It's backstroke. So whatever, you're just going to give them the benefit. There is a huge chance they just missed the pad
You're talking about on 6?
on
6,
6.
the pad's early.
Oh yeah, the pad was early. Oh wait, what am I talking about?
You're talking about 3.
I'd have probably
Actually-
taken the pad on lane 6 just because
Yeah.
it gives benefit to the swimmer.
You're exactly right. I saw it as a 55. I can't see evidently. And that's actually what I did, was I took the pad because it was like, okay, those two, but it's backstroke. Why would they have missed the pad or been early on the pad? That didn't make any sense to me. I can't see my screen here. Okay. So yes, that's what I would have done too. And that is what I did. I just couldn't see. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. See, this is the one I was thinking of, was lane 6 on this one. And there's no wrong answer. I mean, I didn't write the rule book. I can tell you what I would do, but I just, these are, again, it's an IM, so lane 2, same thing. The other interesting thing is we had an issue on that other event. It was lane 2. So could it be a pad issue? Possibly.
Yeah, but how many heats did you have in between with no problem?
I think I had 4, but I don't know that I didn't have a problem. That was
Oh, okay.
just that. Sorry, I didn't mean
It's
to.
probably tough. It's probably just a little stiff and it's 12 and under, and it's just, that kid just didn't hit quite as hard.
Well, and I think there's a light in lane 2 in this pool. So depending on where they hit that pad, because the pad doesn't lay against the back the entire way.
Yeah.
But so here, let's look at lane 6 real quick. So this is the one I was thinking of, because we are within 0.3 of a second and we're we're outside the 0.3 of a second.
What were the watches?
Very good question. They were way off. They had nothing to do with, I'm not even sure they were timing the right lane.
In my experience, if the buttons are off, the watches are usually off also.
Yep.
I would take the pad time.
Yeah, you have something to
That's-
confirm the pad, so.
And that's exactly what I did, because it was like, I have no idea. I can't make heads or tails out of that. So the pad's going to go with it, because I really couldn't prove the pad was wrong. And one thing did prove the pad was right. Okay, this is my favorite one, y'all. Can anybody from looking at this tell me what happened?
Did you miss the start?
No,
Goodness.
he did not miss
No
the
finish
start.
arm. Was it not,
He didn't miss that either.
no, how do you get, no, it's split times. Nobody hit the pad.
Yeah, it was
Or were you on the wrong
Was it
event?
set up was it somehow set up in the event file wrong?
Yeah,
US.
so it looks like you you changed event instead of changing heat. So it stopped at the 50 instead
Yeah.
of 100.
That's exactly what happened. Who said, was it the wrong event? I said that
Oh,
first.
Chris did. Chris did.
Chris, yep, that's exactly what it was. And I could not for the life of me, because I was behind on the meet because all this other stuff had gone on. And I get to this part and I'm like, what the heck? I pulled that thing 4 times. I gave up. I finally went and got the person running the console kept saying, oh no, it's fine, it's fine. I'm like, there is no way.
Those swimmers ate their Wheaties.
Yes, yeah. But I just, and of course, fortunately, everybody that was running the backup buttons, they looked great. So I checked 3 lanes and was like, that's it, I'm done. I just took out. So in this case, what do you do? Because I always say, don't take out times and don't put in times unless you're putting the same time, apples to apples thing. So I took out all the finals times.
Well, why did you take them out? You just calc them and take the buttons.
It didn't want to let me because it kept saying that the backup, it was bizarre. It was so weird. And I could not make it calculate. So
Yeah,
I
then you don't have a choice.
the finals times and it calculated. I have no idea why. I've actually never had that happen. Of all my years, I've never had that happen. So, because I agree with you, David, I clicked all the buttons and told it to adjust it and it would not let me do it. I know. All right, let's see. I might have one more. And unless y'all have questions. The other thing I was going to show you guys, which is one of my tricks that I've used multiple times. Oh, okay. Let's do this one real quick. I have to see what's here. Somebody tell me lane 4. And yes, this is a trick. It really is. I mean, like, it's not going to be the wrong answer because I'll just tell you what I did.
Did you take out some times or something there, Lisa? Because
I
you've got
did
some
not,
places.
because Lisa doesn't like to take times out. I didn't.
How did you get a blue line if there's no times?
It
Because
just
there was just
indicates that
pick
the
out
pad
pad.
is faster than the buttons.
they both missed the buttons is what happened. Neither one of them got the buttons.
Did you check the watches?
You got it. I did. That's all I did. And I did not put times in because I checked the watches and confirmed that the pad time was right. So I didn't waste more time and moved on. And this is the reason I'm using this as an example is this is where people want to instinctively, oh, it's blank, I've got to put times in. No, you don't. What you're doing is proving the pad. So there's no reason to put a time in. I proved the pad, it's there. It's in writing. I have the backup. I mean, I've got the stopwatch times if anybody was going to question it. But there's no reason to put in those stopwatch times because then you have a mixed automatic, semi-automatic, and manual heat. And there's no reason to do that. Now, y'all can do what you want to. That's my philosophy. That's the way I look at it. So, everybody.
The biggest challenge for us was convincing people to quit putting it. Like there is no pad time. There's a no touch. We had one button time and that was it. And the watches confirmed the button, but it was just a button. And people always wanted to put in that second watch, one of the watches or both of the watches. No, just leave it out because the watch confirmed the button. And therefore what's in the system already is the best time. So
That's
just leave it
exactly
alone.
right. Exactly. And I agree, David. That's just the way I look at it. I don't know, and I get during summer league, some people, it's a different mindset, but we aren't in summer league. We are USA Swimming and we have to do what's best for those competitive swimmers. And you don't need to muddy the waters by putting in extra times. You're proving the pad. That's all you're doing. And I think I don't have any other. This one's y'all could all, I mean, you can tell me what you would do here, but lane 1. I don't think there are any questions about this. That's sort of what you were saying, David, just then.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yep. So if your watches are confirming your backup, you're confirming a semi-automatic, and that's all there is to it, and you're done. So here's the trick I want to show y'all. I don't know. I use this all the time, mostly because like if you've been to the Christmas Classic at U of L, you know that there are people everywhere and it's really hard to go get times on the deck. So let me see if I don't think I have one. In this, and I don't want to tell somebody stuff and y'all go, oh my gosh, of course we all know that. So when you're looking at a time, if you have some weird thing, and I wish I had a weird thing that I could show you, but unfortunately I don't. If you had one where there was a time missing here, but this 144.75 on lane 7 is actually in the 150. Does that make sense? So that your timer, whoever's running your console missed a touch. Somebody actually had a touch, they just never put it in. So they missed it. And it looks like the swimmer only swam 150, not a 200. But that 144.75 is right here in the 150 spot. And there's nothing for the 200. Do y'all know if you go to display subtracted, it'll show you. So like this kid could be clipping along 23, 26. All of a sudden it took them a minute to swim at 50. So you know that this 150 time would then be your final time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I use that all the time because that keeps me from having to get up and go trudge around. And typically then you'll be able to see, yeah, oh, that makes sense. That's where they finished. That's this, that's that. Yeah, I saw that kid finish last, you know, so just a trick. Any questions? Anybody have any questions? Are you all still here?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. All right, let me see what my last slide is. Yeah, these are just those final reminders so that we don't all forget. Always make sure you do the times the same way as much as you can, because we do need to be consistent. And then my favorite thing, never reseed unless there is some bizarre thing that has happened, never reseed. And I will tell you, this is a little bit different from high school swimming, because in high school swimming, if you are told early enough, the rule is you have to reseed. In USA swimming, try your best not to ever have to reseed. Okay. And then the last thing that I really want to talk about real quick is that when coaches come to us, you know, none of us should ever be talked down to or yelled at. And it is our job. We have every right to stand up for ourselves. And I really think the easiest way for me is to just listen to them, let them vent, and then repeat back to what they've asked you to look at. And then I put them off because I might, as we all are, we're in the middle of stuff, and that's not going to be the priority right now. That one swimmer can't stop a meet, or that one coach. And then the other side is parents. They need to go through their coach instead of coming to talk to whoever we're working with. They need to go to the coach first. And have the coach come to us, because that's a different story. Now, I will also say,
especially when they're working the table.
Especially when they're working the table. Exactly.
Well, I want to say, if any coaches that comes to the AO table, you need to tell them to talk to the ref. You shouldn't have to talk to the coach at all. I would say just direct them to whoever the deck ref or the meet ref is. That's what they're there for, to solve problem with the coaches. They shouldn't be bothering you at all.
I agree with that, except when the meet ref tells them to come talk to the AO.
Oh, really? I would never do that.
It's a time, I know, but it's a timing issue sometimes, and they don't, you know, they don't always know. They don't know what's going on up there. So I get a lot of coaches that come up there, but you know, I have also seen them beat up on other people verbally. I don't mean that bad, but you know, I mean, it's intense. And I just, from my perspective, I need to tell everybody we have every right to stand up for ourselves, because we are professionals and should never be talked down to by anyone.
And that's why I said that you should refer to the deck ref or the meet ref, and they, you know.
Yeah.
Right. They shouldn't be talked to like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. The other thing I'm going to say is that parents should not be texting their friends who are working the table to get answers to questions. So that's a major pet peeve. And I get it, because I don't have swimmers there anymore. So I understand sometimes that's a hard thing to say no to your friends, but I think you have to sometimes. So if you're working with me, I'm going to tell you I'm not answering that question. So that's just the way I am. All right. Anybody have any questions about any of what I said? All right. If you don't, Becky, you got anything to add?
Yeah, just really quick, I just want to come back and touch on what Christina just said. And let me just add, if you all as AOs are getting a lot of meet referees sending coaches to you, or just meet referees that you're having issues with, I would like to know about that, because I mean, we're all volunteers, so, you know, there's no reason for any of us to make a day harder than it has to be. And we do not have a formal meet referee training program. So maybe there are things that from a meet referee perspective that we need to make sure that we're touching on. So, you know, everybody knows how to find my inbox. I have a lot of email pen pals. So I mean, anything like that. And this was great. I mean, it was helpful for me to hear all of this stuff about the lane timers. So I hope this was good for you all. And I really would like to hear, you know, feedback after you think about this. You know, if this kind of thing was helpful for you, or even if it wasn't a recertification clinic, if it's good for you all, if you want to try to do this again, just to get together and talk about things, I'm open to that. So does anybody else have anything to add for the night?
Well, and I feel the same way, Becky. If in terms of me teaching this class, if there are things that y'all think are helpful and that aren't helpful, somebody let me know, because I really get, you know, I'd rather talk one-on-one about this stuff than have to do these. I'm less comfortable in this environment. So,
Well, I think, Lisa, you did a great job and that was very informative. I really like the exercise part of the clinic. Yeah. So,
Yes, I too want to echo Christina and Becky's thoughts too. This has been really helpful. Lisa, you know, not just all the exercises, but, you know, and I think there is a lot of value one-on-one. There is so much learning that happens trial by fire when you're in a meet, and we gain so much experience by that. But I also think it's really nice for us who are on the table, and there are so few of us, just for all of us to be together, and just to have some of those reminders. It's really good. It's really good for me, and knowing that there is a support group out there. Not that I wouldn't know there isn't anyway, but it's nice to see some other folks from across the state. So thank you.
yeah, I agree with that totally. And we are a small group. That's the thing. We don't get to see each other because we are spread out over the group, over the state. So I appreciate every one of y'all. Thanks for doing this. That's you know, I personally think the dry side is the best side, but hey.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for doing all of the presentation for us and the training materials. And thanks to everybody else for giving us some time tonight. And if no one else has anything to add, we will just call it an evening. So thank you all.
Thank you all. Thanks for joining in.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yes,
Bye, Lisa.
Bye. Thank y'all.
Thanks.